Well, flying can be an unpleasant experience, especially for the 20 plus hours that we typically take flying in between Kisumu and Los Angeles. Though some people seem to enjoy it, I really don't. For me, it's one of those things that I live with because I have no choice. I mean, I love going home and the things I still have to do in diaspora. And when you think about the ticket cost, hidden expenses like Uber, trips between the house and the airport, overweight baggage, the hassles of packing, the ridiculously overpriced stuff at the airport, especially if you forget stuff like food, something as little as a belt, and then add to that potential delays, cancellations. I mean, all of this is really enough to make a grown adult throw some major tantrum. Now, sometimes I really wish that maybe airlines would designate a kid friendly flight and just sit all the people with kids like me in a closed off soundproof section. And I think that would be really cool for both the parents and the other people who don't want to deal with kids at all. Well, good morning, friends. As you can tell, we are not filming it from Karating, but right now we are right in the middle of Kisumu International Airport. And I'm taking literally what is always the worst flight, usually of my year. That trip back from Karating back to California. This is the one flight I never look forward to. And of course, we are boarding the common jumbo jet. As I mentioned to you earlier in my previous videos, and don't forget this, we have not fully transitioned back home permanently. Like I said, this is going to take us a while. It's a process. We are still spending more and more time home, but we have to go back because we've got kids that go to school. We still have work, so I still go back and forth. And so currently, as you can tell, we are just wrapping up the last couple of months in Karating and traveling back to Long Beach. So by the time you see this video, obviously we will be in Long Beach. We'll be back in the US for a little bit. And the plan is we'll spend a couple of weeks here. And definitely, most definitely, we will be traveling back for Christmas. My favorite time of the year. That trip back to Kisumu during Christmas is just the one thing I look forward to the most. So today I want to talk to you about what it's like to travel with little ones alone, especially as a man. Even though we're already back in the US, I'll still be showing you a couple of videos that I've shot in different parts of Kisumu, Karating, and other parts of Kenya. I've got a ton of videos that are already scheduled that will show up in the next couple of weeks. So don't be confused if you're seeing both Kenyan video and California video popping up in the next couple of weeks. Yes, we're back in the US, but we still have lots of clips that will be popping up soon. So before I scare you off about traveling with little kids, I want to let you know that the trips I make with my supervisors multiple times a year is absolutely worth the hassle. Totally worth it. So today we are definitely flying. Our first leg is from Kisumu International Airport to Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which is Kenya's largest airport. And then we'll be boarding Saudi Airlines from JKIA to Jeddah. Then I think we have like a 2.5 hour layover in Jeddah. Then we have a 16-hour flight from Jeddah to LAX. So in total, we are looking at approximately 24 to 26 hours from Kisumu all the way to Long Beach. But you can see the flight from Kisumu to Nairobi, it's the entire team together. Minodidi is here, but we're going to be leaving her behind as we head off with the kids because our schedules almost never line up. So she's here sometimes, she's not there sometimes, as you've seen in many of our videos. Now, I do have some tips that I'm going to share with you that I hope would make your trips manageable for those who are scared of traveling with little kids, particularly for men who are not used to this kind of thing. I'm going to share with you some tips that make this process possible. So don't be scared. We do this, and there are many times when things fall apart. But don't feel too bad either because it's not a reflection of your parenting skills. It happens to the best of us. So anyway, one day probably even as soon as the kids grow old enough, we'll probably sit back and just laugh at this experience. Oh, by the way, take a look at that is Lake Lolwe. Unfortunately, some people call it like somebody, they call it using the name of some British queen who never set foot in Africa. At home, we know is at Lake Lolo, and that is what we call it. So we don't want to hear the other stuff. But really, hearts off to single parents or parents who travel with kids alone. I've sat in a flight with one woman who had triplets, and that was quite an experience on her own. Parents do it all the time. And you know, when women do it, it's considered perfectly normal. But when we do it as men, it's often seen as some heroic special activity that needs to be celebrated. Again, I think that is just a function of some of the biases we have in the society. But yeah, people do this all the time. So there's really nothing unusual about what I do. So, in general, as you already know, that flying alone with kids is generally, for the most part, okay. It works just well. However, there are some cases, truth be told, where I think this is about as close as you can come to real hell when things fall apart. So, if you may ask, what really is unique about traveling with the little kids as a man, especially as a Kenyan man? So, I'm going to highlight three things. Number one, many times when you're traveling with kids, almost everyone assumes that there's a woman traveling with you. The average person does not think that a man can just travel, especially with little kids or even toddlers that are still carried. And so I often run into some really interesting scenarios. For example, when attendants come next to me, when they want to ask questions about the kids, they go straight to the next black woman sitting next to me. They automatically assume that's probably the mother of the kids. And the woman, the poor women often ask, hey, what do you want with their kids? And then the flight attendants have to be redirected back to me. Almost everyone assumes that I'm traveling with some woman next to me, and so they don't even need to talk to me when it comes to kids. And you see that awkward face when they come back, realize, oh, I'm the parent and I'm traveling alone, and they have to talk to me. So that happens all the time. Both the attendants and just the regular passengers who almost always assume that there's got to be somebody that I need to talk to when it comes to the kids. Now, the second most common thing that happens for us men is there are specific stares that you are almost certain to get. And I've kind of over the years classified them into about almost 7 different types of stares. The first look that you get, I see in somebody's face when they are almost thinking, man, I feel bad for you. They're not saying it, but you can just see in their eyes how they really just pity me, hustling around. I'm holding a sleeping baby. There's bugs here. There's another one running around. They just pity you. And that's okay. It's human. In other cases, you see this face where it's almost like somebody's asking you, hey, and where is your wife? It's almost like they are wishing they could talk to my wife and just be very stern with her that she's causing suffering on my end. It's like, dude, where's your wife? Why are you doing this by yourself? Then face number 3 that I get is that face where somebody looks at you and you can tell they're thinking, God, I hope this dude is not going to sit next to me with all the chaos going on. And that face is very obvious to tell. The other face that I get, particularly from women, they look at me like, whoa, dude, you must be really tough. I admire what you're doing. This is quite something. When really it's nothing unusual for us men. Then, of course, unfortunately, and this is especially common in the Western world, that people in the West usually are very suspicious when they see a man around kids. It's almost like a preschool teacher that is male. There's almost this feeling of suspicion around you. They look at you more like, hey, are you allowed to be traveling with these kids? Sort of a face. And then there's a face that I also get from women too, where they look at me like, whoa, dude, my husband should see this. I think he has to do this next time. But the most common face that I love the most is when people just look at the kids and they're like, dude, your kid is absolutely cute. Because there's some people, many people just love seeing kids. And so that part I love. Then the last bit that is unique to us men is bathroom time, especially in airports. Many airports in the Western world, there's no problem. But when you land in a place like JKIA or Kisumu, in many cases, there's not a changing table. So I remember one of these times I am actually squatting in the men's bathroom and I'm changing my baby's diaper. So I'm really just focused on what I'm doing. Then I turn around and I see these 3 men standing behind me, just staring. And I was like, dude, what are you guys doing? But I kind of just thought quickly, like, they just found it really odd that a grown man squatting in a bathroom changing diapers by themselves. They were just like looking at me. But then I also gave them the face like, hey, this is not appropriate. I'm changing my baby here, and you're standing looking at us doing all of that. But yeah, I have a hard time going through Kenyan and airports because many of them don't typically have changing tables, especially in men's bathroom. But besides that, there's really not much that is unique about us traveling with kids. So overall, I would say I've really gotten pretty lucky, all things considered. And so some of the worst case scenarios I might highlight include the following. Number one, if you're traveling with a teething child or a sick child, then yes, you are probably looking at a very long flight. That 16-hour flight would feel like you're traveling for 37 hours. Yeah, sick kids can be really tough. You can't wait to touch down because up there anything can happen, and kids can really get worse so fast, and you may not have options in terms of how to address a kid's challenges. The second problem you might run into is when you're traveling with a kid who has a little more energy than usual, and many kids do that. Even typical kids, on some days they have just more energy than typical. So then you have a kid running around the aisles or kicking your neighbor's seat and flipping stuff, and that can be really intense because you're trying to do the best you can, but the other passengers couldn't care less because obviously you're making them uncomfortable. So when kids choose to have a lot more energy, that can be tough. Or sometimes things go wrong when you forget to pack critical stuff. Or sometimes when you forget to pack the right things in the right place. For example, I think one of those times I actually forgot to pack the right number of diapers. So I quickly ran out of diapers within the first 2 to 3 hours. Thankfully, they have backup options for many flights, I think. So anyway, sometimes also if you have a very long connection between terminals, for example, the terminal at which you land is like miles away from the terminal from which you're taking off. That distance can be quite interesting, especially there are places where there are no trains or you can't get options for like cars and all that. So you may have a pretty long walk with toddlers who are probably cranky and sleepy and all that stuff. So anyway, as many of you may know, for those who've traveled with kids, that their needs will always evolve depending on how young they are. From when they're months old, because I've been traveling with this one still since they were months old, till like my oldest is 6. And their needs will always change. With little ones, the key thing is once they're all swaddled up, make sure you're sitting at a seat that is next to a bassinet area, if you can get that. But if you don't, then you're going to have to hold them on your arm the entire time. And that can be really tough if you're traveling multiple times. Now, between age 2 and 7, I think to me that's like the best age to travel there because now with lots of snacks, stickers, books, and toys, you're good for the most part. And our kids, with that iPad and the infotainment systems, usually they're fine. The challenge for me is that I'm so used to traveling with books, I can no longer do that. There's no option for reading because with my little one, sometimes if you doze or if you forget, things can go wrong. Like on this particular trip that you're actually watching right now, I dozed off for probably no more than 2-3 minutes. The next thing I wake up, and one of the babies who will not be named had already pulled out the life jacket and actually inflated it and had it on his or her neck. So that was quite a spectacle. So with this age, the challenge is you cannot afford to switch off. So that often means you're going to be awake for a much longer duration, if not the entire flight. So that can be a problem. So here's some tips that I've come to rely on over the years. Number one, if you can, choose the window seat, because that way they're not sticking out their legs in the aisle, kicking people or constantly running off. You can actually control their movements in and out of seats. So when you can, like in our case where we travel, the 3 of us, I make sure we have 3 seats from the window all the way to the middle here. And then I put the most active person as far as possible. And this also keeps them busy because they're busy looking outside. And then, of course, the waiting periods in the airport, find stuff to keep them busy. Otherwise, they're going to be touching stuff, rolling around in dirt and all that stuff. Bring a stroller with you that can take you all the way to the gate because you will need that, especially when the kids fall asleep. Now, don't forget enough snacks. And if you can, sometimes, if at all possible, sit next to another parent. It helps quite a bit. And then, whenever possible, plan trips around nap time. Usually, when we leave both Kenya and LAX, we leave at night. So at that time, they just get in, get set, and then after maybe an hour or two, once the plane takes off, I get them to nap. And that oftentimes means it lines up with their sleeping time. So that gives me a little bit of breathing room, because when they're napping, it's fine. The bigger challenge, though, is just how they nap, because when kids fall asleep, it doesn't matter where their legs are, their heads are. And when the two of them are asleep, it's quite a spectacle. I didn't film it, but next time I'll show you. And then, of course, if you can bring something new that is exciting, yes, anything exciting would help quite a bit. But most importantly, too, don't forget, bring extra clothes for yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten that. One time I didn't tie my baby's diaper too well. And then she's sitting on my lap. Next thing I feel is, and parents already know this, that warm gush going between my legs and the seat and all that. And that was actually our 16-hour flight. And so I had to survive the entire flight with the wet pants and everything else. So bring yourself extra clothes so that when things happen, you can change. Anyway, folks, welcome to the United States, and I will see you in the next. Bye.